So how did a single cassette tape topple a king? I mean, really think about that. This is a story that doesn't start with a big explosion, but with a whisper. A whisper smuggled across borders on a plain old cassette tape. You have to remember, this was way before the internet. A cassette tape was basically the ultimate form of dissident media. Just like underground pamphlets in other places, these tapes completely bypass state censors, creating this huge, invisible network of ideas.
And on those tapes, words like these. This was the voice of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a cleric who was living in exile at the time. His sermons, recorded in places like France and Iraq, were copied onto thousands, literally thousands of tapes, and they were secretly passed around all over Iran, carrying a message that was about to set the whole country on fire.
So that's the spark, but for a spark to catch, you need dry tinder. What were the conditions that allowed these words to just explode across the country? Well, to get that, we have to take a look at what life was actually like under the Shah.
See, under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, Iran was a land of, well, total contradictions. On one hand, you had this big push for westernization called the White Revolution. It was all about modernizing the country. But for a lot of traditional and religious folks, this rapid change felt like a full-on attack on their values. And then there was the money. Iran's oil wealth was gushing, but it was flowing right into the pockets of the Shah's inner circle, while a huge chunk of the population was still poor. And if you dared to speak out, well, that's where the Savak came in, the Shah's feared secret police force that brutally crushed any dissent.
Okay, so what happened next is fascinating, because you can literally watch the revolution build its own unstoppable momentum. It all started with that newspaper article insulting Khomeini. That sparked protests, and the Shah's forces opened fire. And this is where a really crucial tradition kicked in, the Shia 40-day mourning period. When people gathered for the memorial, new protests erupted, which led to more violence. You see the pattern. It created this tragic but incredibly powerful cycle. Every 40 days, another city would just explode in protest. The breaking point was Black Friday. The army gunned down protesters in Tehran, and after that, there was no turning back. By January 79, the Shah was on a plane, and he was never coming back.
All right, so the Shah is gone. Khomeini returns to this massive, massive welcome, and he and his followers waste absolutely no time. They moved super fast to build a completely new kind of state, one based on a unique vision he'd been thinking about for years while he was in exile.
The absolute core of this new system is a concept called Vilayat-e-Faqih. It translates to guardianship of the jurist. And look, this wasn't just some new political idea. This was a radical break within Shia Islam itself. For centuries, the main tradition for clerics was to be quietist, basically advise the rulers but stay out of running the country directly. Khomeini flipped that completely on its head. He argued that the most knowledgeable religious expert, the top jurist, must rule the state.
And this new power structure really shows you the kind of hybrid system they built. So you have a president and a parliament, and they're elected. Seems democratic, right? But wait, above them you have the Guardian Council. These are 12 jurists, and their job is to vet every law and every candidate to make sure they're in line with Islam. And then, above all of that, you have the supreme leader. He's the ultimate authority on pretty much everything. So it's this strange, fascinating mix of democratic elements and powerful, unelected clerical oversight.
So how popular was this new idea? Well, just 2 months after he got back, Khomeini put it to a vote. The referendum in March 1979 asked a very simple question. Do you want an Islamic Republic? The result was, well, a landslide doesn't even cover it. Pretty much everyone voted, and a staggering 99% said yes.
Okay, so you've got this brand new republic, born out of a massive revolution. It's going to need a way to protect itself, right? From enemies both inside the country and out.
Now here's the thing. Khomeini did not trust the old army, the one that had served the Shah for all those years. So what did he do? He created a totally separate, parallel force, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. And its members weren't picked for their fancy military training. Nope. They were picked for their ideological loyalty. Their one main job was right there in the name, to guard the revolution. And this quote from Khomeini himself, wow. It really tells you everything you need to know about how important the IRGC was right from the very start. If it were not for the Guard, there would be no country. He didn't just see them as an army, he saw them as the absolute bedrock of the entire state.
And this wasn't just some informal understanding either. Their role was cemented right there in the Constitution. Article 150 gives the IRGC a mission that goes way, way beyond what a normal army does.
It has its own land, air, and naval forces completely separate from the regular military. But get this, it's also tasked with supporting liberation movements around the world. That's an international mission written right into its DNA. So the revolution's big slogan was neither East nor West. They didn't want to be aligned with the Soviets or the Americans. But pretty much immediately, Iran found itself on a collision course with one superpower in particular, the United States, which of course had been the Shah's biggest supporter.
And this was the moment that changed everything, the point of no return. On November 4, 1979, a group of radical students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, which they called a den of spies. They ended up holding 52 Americans hostage, and not for a few days or a few weeks. They held them for 444 agonizing days. That single event just shattered U.S.-Iran relations, and you could argue they've never recovered.
The U.S. response was fast, and it was harsh. President Carter's administration froze nearly $12 billion in Iranian assets. We're talking bank deposits, gold, you name it. And that really marked the beginning of this long, drawn-out economic conflict that is in many ways still going on.
And that freeze in '79 was just the beginning. For the next 4 decades, sanctions became a constant fact of life for Iran. You can see how it just builds and builds. In the 90s, the U.S. went after Iran's energy sector. Then, in the 2000s, the UN got involved, piling on sanctions because of Iran's nuclear program. And then, much more recently, we had the Maximum Pressure Campaign, which was designed to basically cut Iran out of the global financial system altogether.
So with all this pressure from the outside and all the challenges on the inside, you might expect things to crumble. But one institution didn't just survive, it thrived, and that was the IRGC. It grew from that loyal militia we talked about into a massive political and economic empire.
Yeah, today the IRGC is so much more than just a military force. People call it a state within a state, and for good reason. They control huge chunks of the Iranian economy. We're talking construction, telecom, oil and gas, you name it. A lot of this started after the Iran-Iraq war in the 80s. The country was devastated, and IRGC-linked companies stepped in to do the rebuilding, and in the process, they became this absolute economic behemoth.
And as you can imagine, this incredible power has created a major political split inside Iran itself. It's really one of the biggest debates in the country. On the one side, you've got the conservatives. They see the IRGC as the essential guardian of the revolution. But on the other side, you have the reformists, and they argue that the Guard's massive role in politics and the economy actually smothers democracy and holds the country back.
This chart does a great job of showing just how deeply the IRGC is woven into the fabric of the state. It's not just about military power. Look at that. It's also a huge player in the economy and in politics. And the key thing to understand is that these three things all feed each other. Their economic power funds their military operations. Their political power protects their business interests. It creates this kind of self-reinforcing loop of power that's really hard to break.
Which brings us to our final question. And it's a big one. After more than 40 years, is the Iranian Revolution still just in its early days? It sounds kind of crazy, but some people in Iran argue that for a country with thousands of years of history, 40 years is just the blink of an eye. For them, the revolution isn't a historical event that's over, it's an ongoing process. And its full impact on Iran, on the Middle East, and on the rest of the world, well, maybe we haven't even seen it yet.